Sabi niya, you wouldn't believe me anyways. Kasi sobrang incredulous ng story. Like, who's going to believe that she had been in the basement of their family house for 24 years and no one knew? Hi everyone, you may call me Elena, and today kukwentuhan ko kayo ng isang true crime story about Elisabeth Fritzl and his crimes, which were made worse dahil they were committed against his own daughter named Elisabeth.
Ang episode na ito ay naglalaman ng mga detalye tungkol sa pagkabihag, sexual na pang-abuso at insesto. Maaaring nakakaapekto ito sa mga manonood lalo na sa mga bata at sa mga may karanasan ng trauma. Ang gabay ng magulang o tagapag-alaga ay mahigpit na ipinagpapayo.
I chose Elisabeth Fritzl's case as the first episode of this show dahil ito yung gateway crime ko. Ito yung first true crime story na talagang sinubaybayan ko. Talagang sobrang nabagabag ako dun sa story. And all of this came to light in 2008, so medyo recent history pa siya. Depende kung gaano katanda na kayo. So I divided the story into 4 parts. The early life of Elisabeth Fritzl, the childhood of Elisabeth, her life in captivity, and then the endgame. Let's begin. Our story begins in 1935 in the city of Amstetten in Austria. Remember, this is Austria in Europe, not Australia kung nasan yung mga kangaroos. So if you've been to Austria, the capital is Vienna, and then 130 kilometers to the west, nandun yung maliit na city of Amstetten. According to records, Joseph was an only child, and ang tatay niya is soldier, but he was also an alcoholic. Unfortunately, he left the family when Joseph was only 4 years old, so nanay niya lang talaga yung kasama niyang lumaki. Tapos, yung nanay niya was also documented to be abusive physically and emotionally to Joseph. So, wala talaga siyang warmth habang lumalaki siya. Meron pang story na during World War II, nung less than 10 years old lang si Joseph, habang binobomba daw yung syudad nila, hindi man lang siya niyayakap ng nanay niya. So, wala talaga siyang naramdaman na parang pagkalinga galing sa nanay niya, apart from being actually physically abused by her. You might notice, in a lot of criminal cases, the perpetrator always has a history, not always, but most of the time, has a history of abuse as a child. So, kung hindi man emotional and physical abuse, possible na nagkaroon sila ng parang trauma to their brain, like parang nabaldog sila, naalog yung utak nila or something like that. So, yeah, that's a not so fun fact. In 1956, nung 21 years old na si Joseph, pinakasalan niya si Rosemary, who at the time was only 17 years old. At this point, Joseph is already working in construction. I don't know kung ano talagang inaral niya, pero ang background niya talaga is in civil engineering, electrical, and construction. In total, they had 7 children together. Pang-apat dun sa mga anak na yon si Elisabeth, and she was born in 1966. Masamang damo talaga to si Joseph kasi apart dun sa main crime na ikukwento ko sa inyo today, meron pa siyang mga extra na side quest na crimes. For example, in 1967, meron siyang ni-rape na isang nurse. Mag-isa lang sa bahay yung nurse, wala yung asawa niya. Tapos pumunta lang si Joseph doon and ni-rape niya that nurse with a knife to her throat. Meron pang mga connected sa kanya na cases like indecent exposure and another rape. And then when all this came to light, na-connect din yung name niya to some other crimes including murder, but he was not convicted in those, so hindi ko na masyadong ikukwento. But for the 1967 rape nung nurse, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison, only 18 months for rape, and then he was out after 12 months lang. Unbelievable. Now let's talk about the childhood of Elisabeth. According sa mga kwento and official testimonies, very strict talaga si Joseph. So in their household, he ruled with an iron fist, and very submissive lang si Rosemary as a mother, and whatever Joseph say goes. There are stories that he physically abuses his wife and also the children, but si Elisabeth daw yung pinaka-malala yung abuse. According sa mga story, she's very withdrawn and hindi siya masyadong nakikipaglaro, and parang obvious daw na siya yung least favorite sa lahat ng mga anak. Konting kibot lang, masasampal na siya kagad ni Joseph. Meron pang isang kwento galing sa best friend ni Elisabeth nung nag-aaral pa siya, na very strict daw talaga si Joseph, and kailangan nasa bahay na si Elisabeth 30 minutes after ng school. So, hindi siya pwedeng magtambay-tambay. Pagkatapos ng school, diretso uwi na kagad siya, or mapapagalitan siya or mabubugbog siya ni Joseph. And apart from that, hindi din daw pwedeng bumisita yung mga friends ni Elisabeth sa bahay nila. She was kept isolated and wala talaga siyang support system. In 1977, when Elisabeth was only 11 years old, unfortunately, it's when Joseph started to sexually abuse her. She was only 11. After this, during her teen years, she entered this rebelde era. But can you blame her with how horrible her home life is? Despite all this, natapos pa din niya yung mandatory schooling niya sa Austria, which I think is parang junior high yata ang equivalent sa Philippines. Tapos, nung 15 years old na siya, nag-enroll siya sa isang course to become a waitress. This is the first time na tumira siya outside of their family and nagkaroon siya ng idea na parang doon na na-plant yung seed na gusto niyang umalis sa bahay nila. In 1983, nung 16 or 17 years old siya, naglaya siya sa bahay nila. Pumunta siya sa Vienna, nakitira siya sa bahay ng kaibigan niya. Hindi niya sinabi sa family niya kung nasan siya, as in naglayas talaga siya. Tapos, of course, ni-report ng family niya sa police na missing siya. So, hinanap siya and they found her in Vienna, the capital, and they just sent her back to her abusive home. Pagkatapos nito, in 1984, natapos niya na yung course niya to become a waitress and she actually got an offer for a job in Linz. Linz is a city to the north of Amstetten. Mas maliit siya kaysa sa Vienna, pero mas malaki siya kaysa sa Amstetten. So parang ito na yung, she can see the light at the end of the tunnel na parang meron na siyang possible path out of her home life. But sadly, this did not come into fruition. In August 28, 1984, Joseph put his horrible plans into motion. He lured Elisabeth into the basement under the guise na kailangan niya ng tulong ni Elisabeth sa whatever he's doing sa basement. Bumaba silang dalawa. When they got there, in-overpower niya si Elisabeth, itinulak niya papasok sa isang maliit na pinto, tapos gamit yung isang panyo na may ether or parang chloroform, tinakpan niya yung bibig ni Elisabeth, which rendered her unconscious, and then he locked her inside. And this is the beginning of Elisabeth's life in captivity. Now I'm gonna backtrack a little bit to give you extra information. Remember, nung 1977, nung 11 years old lang si Elisabeth, is when nag-umpisa siyang rapin ng tatay niya. 1 year after that, 1978, nag-apply si Joseph ng plans to create a basement or a nuclear shelter sa ilalim ng bahay niya. Malaki na talaga yung bahay nila, pero gusto niya pang mag-extend. Ang sinabi niya dun sa plans is gagawa siya ng nuclear shelter, which was quite common at the time kasi after the war, gusto ng mga taong magkaroon ng parang bunker style na safe space in case magkaroon ulit ng bombahan. And then it came to light during the trial na around 1981 or 1982, dun siya nag-umpisa na talagang i-convert yung nuclear shelter plans into kind of a prison. So naglagay siya ng lutuan, ng banyo, ng lababo. Coincidentally, ito din yung time na unang tumira sa ibang bahay si Elisabeth. So, pag tinignan niyo yung timing ng mga pinaggagawa nito ni Joseph, medyo kahina-hinala talaga. So, 1 year after niyang umpisahan rapin si Elisabeth is when siya nag-apply nung plans to create that bunker. And then, nung time na nag-aaral na at hindi na doon nakatira si Elisabeth, doon niya ginawa talagang parang prison yung nuclear shelter. So, parang it makes you think, yun ba talaga ang purpose niya doon sa ginagawa niyang excavation? Gusto niya ba talagang gumawa ng sex dungeon for Elisabeth?
Malaki yung mismong building nila and it's divided into 2 areas. Dun sa parting unahan, parang rental property na layo na meron silang mga tenants living there during the time of Elisabeth's captivity. And then behind that, yun na yung main living area ng upstairs family niya. So yun yung mas malaking area na nandun yung asawa niya and yung the rest ng mga anak niya. Ang total land area ng property nila is parang around 100 square meters. Tapos sa likod nung mismong building, meron silang parang backyard area na meron silang pool doon and parang isang shed. Yung planned basement extension na ginawa niya, supposedly according sa plans, is sa ilalim lang ng main house. Pero ang totoong nangyari is in-extend niya hanggang dun sa ilalim ng tenant area dun sa unahan ng building. Pagkababa mo dun sa basement extension, meron kang parang mga 5 or 6 na pinto na kailangang daanan bago mo marating ang isang maliit na pinto directly leading to the dungeons of Elisabeth. Isa dun sa mga pinto na kailangan mong daanan is parang 300 kilos. Sobrang bigat niya kasi apart from metal, reinforced by concrete din siya.
As I mentioned before, ang background talaga niya is in construction and electrical. So, alam niya kung ano yung ginagawa niya.
Sa initial plans na sinubmit niya para makapag-excavate siya, hindi kita tong pinto na to at kung ano man nasa likod niya. So, hindi alam ng mga authorities or parang planning, zoning, whatever committee na meron siyang mga secret rooms na ginawa sa ilalim ng bahay niya. Hindi daw nakita in the inspection yung maliit na door dahil baka tinakpan niya yun ng pader during the inspection. Tapos, tinanggal niya lang yung pader nung ready na siya na gamitin yung room or nung tapos na yung inspection. Yung maliit na door, kailangan mo talagang yumuko or even gumapang para makapasok ka doon. And meron siyang electronic lock na kailangan mo ng code. Si Joseph lang yung nakakaalam ng code na yun. Pagkapasok mo sa door na yun, kailangan mong dumaan sa parang makipot na eskinita bago ka makarating dito sa area na merong maliit na kama, maliit na lababo, shower, and toilet. Ito na yung initial na living area ni Elisabeth.
And side note, apparently nakakuha pa siya ng funds to build this bunker dahil sa paningin ng mga tao sa labas, he's this outstanding citizen in the society. So parang nabigyan pa siya ng funds.
20 square meters lang yung total floor area nung initial na living space ni Elisabeth. So, mas maliit lang siya ng konti sa studio ng SMDC. Yun nga lang, wala siyang bintana, wala siyang source of natural light, wala siyang hot water, wala siyang heating, wala siyang source of airflow. Ang sukat pa niya from floor to ceiling is only 1.6 meters or 5 feet 6 inches. Ang average sa Austria na floor to ceiling for living area is 2.4 to 2.7 meters or 8 to 9 feet. Over time during the captivity, nag-expand din yung downstairs area. So, nagkaroon ng 2 additional na rooms na hinukay lang nila by hand. Kwento ko more about this later. Tapos, ang naging total area na at the time of discovery was about 40 square meters. So, parang 1-bedroom unit na to ng SMDC.
Now, let's go back to 1984. Nung nagising si Elisabeth, nasa isa siyang madilim na kwarto, hindi siya makagalaw, mag-isa lang siya, nakaposas yung kamay niya sa likod niya. Imagine the fear that you would go through kung bigla ka nalang nagising na ganun yung environment mo. Meanwhile, upstairs, dahil nga nawala na siya, nireport siya ng nanay niya sa police as missing. Tapos, dahil meron siyang history ng paglalayas, hindi masyadong taken seriously yung naging case niya, so hindi siya masyadong hinanap. Apart from that, meron din mga ginawa si Joseph to derail the investigation. One of them is pinagsulat niya si Elisabeth ng letter, kunyari addressed to her family, saying na, don't look for me, I'm just tired of living at home, I'm living with a friend. I'm not sure kung sinabi niya dun sa letter na living with a friend or parang nag-join siya ng cult, pero dahil dun sa letter na sinend niya, parang yun na yung proof of life, tapos hindi na tinuloy ng police yung paghahanap sa kanya. According to the fact of the case, every 9 a.m. bumababa si Joseph para bisitahin si Elisabeth dun sa prison niya. Ang sinasabi ni Joseph kay Rosemary sa upstairs family niya is dun siya sa may basement nagtatrabaho. So, nagdo-drawing siya ng plans or whatever para sa mga machines daw na binibenta niya. Bawal siyang istorbohin habang nagtatrabaho siya, but in reality, nire-rape niya lang si Elisabeth. For 5 years, mag-isa lang si Elisabeth dun sa prison niya. And ang only human interaction niya is kapag bumababa si Joseph para i-abuse siya. Wala siyang sunlight, wala siyang fresh air, 20 square meter of space lang yung meron siya doon. Sobrang sakit sa damdamin isipin na mag-isa lang siya doon with no hope at all of getting out. Now let's talk about the span of time from 1988 to 2003. This is when her children were born. The first child that she had was a daughter named Kirsten, born in 1988. Nung pinanganak si Kirsten, very bittersweet moment for Elisabeth. Sweet kasi finally, of course, it's her own child, so medyo may happiness pa din, but very bitter kasi she knows what kind of environment kakalakihan yung anak niya. Not even that, but very uncertain. Like, dito ba lalaki yung anak niya? Papatayin ba to ng tatay niya? Like, hindi niya alam kung ano yung mangyayari. So, you can imagine the fear that she had for her own child. Tapos, nung nanganganak pa siya, nandun si Joseph, binigyan lang siya ng gunting para siya yung mag-cut ng pusod. Wala siyang kahit anong support system nung nanganak siya. Tapos, after niyang manganak, hindi bumisita si Joseph for 10 whole days. Mag-isa lang siya doon. Paano kung nagkaroon siya ng complications from childbirth? She would have died and the baby would have died with her. Bear with me kasi ang daming mangyayari dito, like all of the childbirths and everything. So I will have the timeline over here for you to act as your guide. Alright, and then 1990, 2 years after Kirsten was born, her second child was born, which is Stefan. And then 2 years after that, again, nanganak ulit siya. Another daughter naman, her name is Lisa. So dumadami na sila. At this point, binigyan sila ng task ni Joseph na maghukay para i-expand yung kwarto nila. So kung natatandaan nyo yung sa diagram kanina, merong isang space na sabi ko babalik tayo doon. Ito na yon. So sila yung nagdig nung space na yon para lumaki yung living area nila dun sa ilalim ng main bahay. 1 year after ipanganak si Lisa, hindi binanggit kung ano yung reason, pero nag-decide si Joseph na iakyat siya sa upstairs. Ang ginawa niya is, kunyari, iniwan ni Elisabeth yung bata na nakalagay sa karton sa front door nila sa upstairs. So, meron siyang ipina-force ulit niyang magsulat ng letter si Elisabeth, nakalagay doon, ito sinulat ko.
Dear parents, I'm leaving you my daughter Lisa. Take good care of my little girl. I breastfed her for about 6.5 months and now she drinks her milk from the bottle. She's a good girl and she eats everything else from the spoon.
So, nagpanggap siya dun sa letter while being forced by her father to write na hindi niya kayang alagaan si Lisa. So, iniwan niya lang dun sa doorstep. Parang naloko nila yung social workers, tapos they were able to adopt Lisa. They meaning Joseph and Rosemary. Parang formally in-adopt nila si Lisa as their own child kahit na missing originally yung totoo nilang anak na si Elisabeth. For some reason, there was no investigation whatsoever. Alright, so that's 1993. And then 1994, 1 year after, nanganak ulit si Elisabeth from the rape of her dad. The name of this daughter is Monica. Like Lisa, she was also brought upstairs. Again, meron ulit letters saying na hindi niya kayang palakihin on her own si Monica like Lisa. Tapos, parang no one questioned it anymore dahil nangyari na before. So, this time, hindi na nagpunta yung social worker or anything. It didn't raise any questions at all. So, nung pinanganak si Monica, she was brought directly upstairs. So, she didn't get to spend time with Elisabeth at all. 2 years after that, nanganak ulit siya, this time twins, both boys, named Alexander and Michael. Unfortunately, Michael died 3 days after birth, so si Alexander lang yung natira. Like his sisters, Alexander was also brought upstairs when he was 15 months old. Same story, meron din kasamang letter, nakalagay din siya sa karton. Ang dahilan, kunyari, ni Elisabeth is that hindi niya kayang palakihin din that other son. Again, it didn't raise any questions. Meron akong mga nabasa na reason daw kaya iniakyat yung 3 children na yon is because iyakin sila. So, hindi pwede na may maingay. Of course, natatakot si Joseph na may makarinig dun sa iyak and may mag-investigate saan nanggagaling yung sound ng umiiyak na bata. In 2003, the last of this phase is when the youngest of Elisabeth's children was born. His name is Felix and isa siya dun sa mga naiwan sa cellar. So in total, 7 yung naging anak ni Elisabeth. 1 died, Michael. 3 of them were brought upstairs and 3 of them remained with her. The ones that remained with her are the first 2, Kirsten, Stefan, and then the youngest, Felix. In interviews after all of this came to light, parang sinabi ni Elisabeth, yun nga, na bittersweet na magkaroon siya ng mga anak doon, but they were the reason why she didn't go crazy. Nagkaroon siya ng purpose and she had to be strong for her children. So for 24 years, Elisabeth and her children lived in that dungeon. For supplies and sustenance, Joseph provided them with basic food and vitamins. Over time, naglagay din siya ng TV, ng radio, nagdadala din siya ng books and toys. So parang nung trial na, parang pinapalabas ng defense team na he's not this monster, na meron din siyang parang affection talaga for the children, kaya binibigyan niya ng mga toys and nakikipaglaro siya. But be for real. Like, do you really believe that you are not a monster? Diba? Tapos, parang, yun nga, binibigyan niya ng occasional toys. Tapos, sometimes pinapakitaan pa niya ng picture ng mga kapatid nila upstairs. Remember, meron silang 3 kapatid na dinala upstairs. Pinapakitaan niya yung mga anak niya downstairs ng pictures ng mga anak niya upstairs. Like, what? Anyway, apart from that emotional torture, madami din silang physical difficulties. The lack of sufficient nutrients. Number one is vitamin D dahil wala silang sunlight doon. Nag-try si Joseph, bigyan sila ng vitamin D, naglagay din siya ng mga UV lamps, but it's not going to be enough. So over time, sobrang decayed na yung teeth nila. By the time this all came to light, wala nang ngipin si Kirsten, the oldest child. And then si Stefan, the oldest son, he grew tall, but since mababa lang yung kisame nung living quarters nila, lagi siyang nakayuko. So, nagkaroon siya ng permanent posture problems. So, apart from that, nagkaroon din sila ng anemia due to the general lack of nutrients that they were getting during their life there. Apart from all this, hindi ko nababanggitin lahat ng mga sobrang horrible things that Joseph did to them, but some of them include threats na igagas sila doon sa underground cellar para mamatay silang lahat if they disobeyed him. If you know about the gas chambers during the Nazi era, that's what they were threatened with. Also, sinabi pa na kapag hinawakan nila yung electrical door that serves as kind of the barrier for them and the outside world. Pero sobrang dami din, tatandaan nyo dun sa diagram kanina, sobrang daming pinto na kailangan nilang daanan. Sinabi ni Joseph na kapag hinawakan nila yon or they tried to tamper with it, makukuryente sila. And then, the children have never seen the sun ever in their life. Tapos, minsan, pinapunish pa sila ni Joseph by cutting off their electricity. So, wala na nga silang natural light. Tapos, ika-cut off pa yung electricity nila. It has been a horrible existence and activity. Elisabeth tried her best to be a mother. As I said before, she said her children gave her purpose in the basement. Sobrang horror story for her to have her babies, her children living there, but she did her best. She taught them how to read and write. She read them stories. She did try to educate her children. Meanwhile, upstairs, no one actually made a huge effort to look for Elisabeth. Imagine she was missing for 24 years, but no one revisited the case. Usually kapag cold case, merong maglo-look back na detective into it, but no one actually did. And even her parents, her mother, Rosemary, didn't try to find her. They all just took whatever Joseph told them at face value. Tapos, merong isang tenant na nagsabi during the investigation na meron daw siyang mga naririnig na sounds, pero ang sabi daw ni Joseph, it's just the pipes making those noises. And also, because of the letters that she was sending, akala ng lahat parang it was true na nasa cult lang siya or she's alive. But during the trial, nung nire-read nila yung mga letters na supposedly sinend ni Elisabeth during the period na she was gone, it was obviously coerced daw, the language, and obviously dictated. This was all in hindsight. At the time they were receiving it, no one kind of batted an eye. And imagine, kasi diba pang-apat na anak si Elisabeth, so meron siyang 3 older siblings. Were none of them curious kung anong ginagawa ng tatay nila in the basement? Was no one, concerned enough about her to actually look for her? It's just very sad all around. And then, during this time pa, na in those 24 years, Joseph was kind of living a normal life. Well, as normal a life as you can have while maintaining 2 families within the same house. Apparently, at this point, he was in real estate na, like buying and selling properties, and he was going on vacations. Meron siyang 2 kind of lengthy vacations to Thailand na documented. Excuse me, sir, merong mga taong nakadepend kung ano man mangyari sa kanya while on vacation. Everyone, like 4 people are going to die of starvation dun sa ilalim ng bahay nila. And he just, he didn't care. Okay, now let's talk about the endgame. Malapit na tayong matapos. So, the year is 2007. During the investigation, meron silang nakitang letter that Joseph made Elisabeth write. According to the facts of the case, nakalagay daw dun sa letter, parang ini-imply na kunyari daw makakatakas na si Elisabeth dun sa cult where she's in and uuwi na siya. So parang the idea is parang nagpaplano na si Joseph na pakawalan sila and making some moves para magmuka na nanggaling talaga sila sa cult and parang ma-rescue na sila or something like that. It wasn't explicitly said why, or I just couldn't couldn't find information. Pero may mga theories why at this point ayaw na niyang ituloy yung mga kalokohan niya. Number one is dahil daw matanda na siya. Kasi in 2007, 72 years old na si Joseph. So parang maintaining two families and the lie, kailangan niyang bumaba palagi and everything. Parang it's already taking a toll on him and parang hindi niya na kaya and he's trying to find a way out of it. Or number two, it's because matanda na din si Elisabeth. She's not attractive for him anymore and ayaw na niyang i-maintain and i-rape niya. So parang there's no value in it anymore for him. But before this letter was ever sent upstairs, something happened in 2008. Si Kirsten, the oldest daughter, she was 19 years old at the time, nagkasakit siya. She was severely ill, tapos to the point na nag-collapse siya. Si Elisabeth pleaded and begged her father na dalhin sa ospital si Kirsten. And for the first time ever, Joseph did the right thing. He actually relented and brought Kirsten upstairs. This was the first time ever that Kirsten saw the outside. The first time ever she saw the sky. The first time ever she left that small space that had been her home from the day she was born. On April 19, 2008, Joseph brought Kirsten to the hospital, and that was the catalyst that led to the family being liberated from their prison. Once they arrived at the hospital, Kirsten was so sick they had to put her in an artificially induced coma dahil hindi talaga kinakaya ng katawan niya. And then all of the doctors were very suspicious because of the malnutrition of Kirsten that they started asking questions. The doctor said that Kirsten was very pale, she had severe vitamin D deficiency, and wala na siyang teeth. Like, sobrang nag-decayed na yung teeth niya at that point. That is on top of whatever serious illness she had. Naturally, they reported it to the police, and then the police was very suspicious. Ang sabi ni Joseph, parang nakita niya lang daw si Kirsten at his front door na ganun yung condition. That's why he brought her directly to the hospital. But at this point, the police weren't buying it anymore. So the police broadcasted an appeal looking for Kirsten's mother sa TV and sa radio and everywhere. At dahil may TV si Elisabeth sa dungeon, nakita nila yung pinapabroadcast ng police na hinahanap yung nanay ni Kirsten. Nagmakaawa ulit siya sa tatay niya na please let me go up and explain. Kasi parang, si Kirsten yung pinakamatanda niyang anak and naging companion niya talaga and anchor niya into reality yung children niya, diba? So parang she needed to be there. And for some reason, Joseph relented again and brought them upstairs. So at the end of April 2008, dun na first time nakalabas si Stefan and Felix from the underground. At this time, 42 years old na si Elisabeth. So she's been there from 18 years old to 42 years old for a total of 24 years. Joseph brought Elisabeth and the two children to the police, and sinabi niya the three of them escaped the cult, but the police weren't believing him anymore kasi it just doesn't match to the physical conditions of the four individuals. They did an interview with Elisabeth. In the beginning, parang very hesitant pa si Elisabeth magsabi ng truth kasi sabi niya, you wouldn't believe me anyways. Kasi sobrang incredulous ng story. Like, who's going to believe that she had been in the basement of their family house for 24 years and no one knew? And then after some time, sinabi niya, okay, I'm going to tell you the truth under the condition that I never have to see my father again. Ayaw na niyang makita ever si Joseph. So a formal interview followed and Joseph was finally arrested. So in 2009, the trial of Elisabeth Fritzl began. It was a whole media circus, internationally known yung case because it's so wild and sobrang bothering ng lahat ng details that came to light. He was charged with murder, enslavement, incest, rape, coercion, and false imprisonment. Initially, he pleaded not guilty to murder, but after 3 days of trial, after hearing 11 hours of testimony ni Elisabeth, he turned around and pleaded guilty to everything. Video testimony lang yung kay Elisabeth, hindi siya nag-testify in court dahil nga yung condition niya na ayaw na niyang makita ever yung tatay niya, and it was actually honored by the authorities. Nung patapos na yung trial, parang sinabi ni Joseph na he's actually remorseful and that if he could take it back, he would, na hindi niya nagagawin yun. But is he just saying this? Kasi mukha talaga siyang evil. Mukha talaga siyang demonyo. But At least he did plead guilty and he waived his right to an appeal. So because of this, he was promptly sentenced to life imprisonment at a psych facility. Finally. So, ano nang nangyari kay Elisabeth and her children? Immediately after release, they had to undergo intensive therapy for abuse, which obviously they did suffer. Tapos, si Kirsten was in a coma for 7 weeks before she was woken up. Meron ding attempts to reconciliate the upstairs family and the downstairs family. Meron ding statement na ni-release si Elisabeth, kind of exonerating her mother from the crime, saying na as far as she knows, walang alam talaga yung nanay niya, and that even when she was living upstairs, talagang ina-abuse ni Joseph si Rosemary. I didn't look into where they actually are now because I think they deserve that privacy. Apparently, they were given new identities and they were given support from the government to start anew somewhere else. Wherever they are, I hope they are getting the support that they need, and sana nakahanap sila ng way forward to heal as family and individuals. As for Joseph, he's still in prison. He's going to rot there. He already has dementia. Hindi ko alam kung anong sasabihin ko after all of that. Siguro, I don't know, mabuti pang wala kang tatay kung ganito lang din yung magiging tatay mo. So, that is the horrible story of Elisabeth Fritzl and her children. I hope I was able to do the story some justice and maintindihan nyo kung bakit tumatak talaga sa akin itong case na to. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, and let me know kung meron kayong case na gusto nyong i-cover ko next time. Thanks and goodbye.